Hey there everybody, Eric from Outer Limitless coming at you today with another video. Now today I received a package in the mail. This is something I have wanted for a long time. It's one of those items that I've known I've wanted and I really needed, but with everything going on and trying to run the channel and with all the other priorities in life, I've kind of put it off and put it off and put it off. But finally, today is the day when I have something to show for my patience, something to show for what I've really waited for, and at this point, I have found the exact item that I was looking for, and this is even nicer than anything I had even hoped for in the past. And this is the item I was talking about. This is a handmade, beautiful bucksaw from Nick Stowell, who is the owner of Stowell's Outdoor Solutions. I recently purchased this from him because I needed a saw. I've had a couple of other saws in the past. Between Silky Saws, I've had a Silky Pocket Boy and also a Silky Gomtaro, both of which were excellent saws, but at this point those saws have had some trouble. Both of them have their issues and things that I really needed to address, so I was in the market for a saw when I came across this. And this to me is one of those pieces. It's not only going to be an excellent saw for myself, but this is, in my opinion, something that I would consider to be heirloom quality. So if taken good care of and with a little bit of luck, this is something that should make it hopefully beyond my lifetime and is something I would certainly love to pass down through the generations. And if you're interested in seeing what I'm about to show you, do me a favor. Stay tuned. So as I mentioned, my Silky products have been beat. Here you'll see my Pocket Boy. The tip has broken off. The saw's been bent in all kinds of crazy directions, and even at that, it feels sharp when I'm kind of running my finger across it, but the wood is not so concerned with this anymore. So I'd say it's pretty much lost its ability to be effective for me. I mean, everything else is really perfectly fine, but just at this point where it's not that sharp and it's got its issues with the tip and the curve, I was like, you know what? It's kind of maybe time to retire this thing. And my Silky Gomtaro is still an excellent saw, still reasonably true, pretty darn sharp, but it suffered a Christmas Day failure when I messed up and left the sheath on the back side of my truck and drove away, and it got smashed into a million pieces. So I have made this half-ass duct tape sheath, but this to me is not really one of those things that I'm too proud to show off, and it works okay at best, and never mind, the next time it rains, this is not going to be doing all too well. So I felt as though it was time. Like I said, I was in the market for a bucksaw, and this is the one I came across. So you'll see here this beautiful, nicely made nylon sheath. I believe this is nylon. It feels like it to me. Has a Velcro field here, which for me, I would probably just put a couple of morale patches, but you could put a Velcro pouch on here, which would work pretty well. You'll notice at the bottom that this has a clip and a little flap, which is very interesting, and I will show you why very soon. And then on the top, this is how you actually expose the saw. And finally on the back, a couple of D-rings, which would allow you to either lash this to a pack or potentially put a strap so you could sling it over your shoulder. Now before I leave the details on the sheath, what I would like to show you is here I have my Gränsfors Brook Scandinavian Forest Axe, and the sleeve I'm talking about here would work very well to hold your axe. So if I enclose it in here, you will see that it fits nicely and perfectly appropriately in there, making a self-contained package for not only the saw, but also the ability to carry an axe. So that is a pretty interesting and unique feature. I am not all that familiar with these buck saws, nor their sheaths. So if this is standard for any other designs, I am not sure, but for me, I think that's pretty cool. So it gives you a nice, easy, and reasonably compact solution if this is all you wanted to carry. So definitely very neat. Now in terms of the color, I could kind of go either way. I do see the benefit to having the bright orange. I mean, especially from a visibility perspective, you're not going to lose your saw. If you have it in here, you're not going to forget to pick it up and bring it with you. Personally, for me, I tend to like subdued colors in general, so something more like an olive color would be pretty good. It would match a little bit better with my gear. I like to maintain a low profile and kind of keep myself reasonably hidden. So in that regard, having something that's big, bright, and orange on the back of my pack is a little bit in conflict with my typical style. However, I do like it. I really like the style of the sheath. I like the features and I like the overall construction. It appears to be very well made. I think there's an ample amount of Velcro to hold this together. I do not see any concern with it potentially falling out. So from a construction standpoint and from a functionality standpoint, definitely 2 thumbs up. From an aesthetic overall appearance standpoint, well, I can go either way, but that's just personal preference. And now getting into the saw. Sliding it out here. One last thing worth mentioning is that this sleeve is nicely, and I mean very nicely, lined in felt. It actually feels like almost like a microfiber or like a light fleece, but very well done. So I mean, no fear that you're going to accidentally scratch up your saw. I mean, nothing like that. So overall, very well done on this sheath. Now these buck saws can be purchased in multiple different woods. I happen to have one in the 2-tone combination of, and I hope I'm saying this right, but paddock, which is this reddish color, and walnut, which is the medium brown here. So a beautiful color combination when you look at them together. I found this to really catch my attention and was very interesting, and that's what really turned me on to this particular saw. And then I did a bunch of research on Stowell's outdoor solutions, and these seem to be very highly regarded saws, so I knew I was in good shape. And then looking at this saw is absolutely beautiful. So this is no different than most buck saws that you'll see. It is a packable design and folds up. And then here you'll see a bajo blade. So this is the dry wood blade, which this comes, I believe, standard. And basically all you do is the typical installation of the cross piece. So you have a mortise and tenon design. So the tenon being this piece here, and the mortise being the sort of female side on the handle, and then inserting these together. Overall, this is a very nice fit. I did find that one side is extremely tight, and then the other side, so you'll see here, has just a little bit of movement. This side here has absolutely no play whatsoever. So I'm gonna try to swell this up with a little bit of oil before I put this into field use, because I do not want to potentially damage that over time. I pretty much just have this paracord, which is nicely notched on the end of the handles. Basically, this fits on here perfectly and has just some really nice notches to allow this to sort of index into place. And then to tighten the blade, very typical. Just kind of spinning this around until you get a nice tension. And I'm gonna say at this point, not really sure what the proper tension is. Again, I have never owned one of these buck saws, so this is my first go around. But for me, I will certainly be able to experiment and get it right. But that gives you, in essence, the idea. So very nicely made, nicely constructed, just beautiful design. I really love this color combination. I think it is exquisite. I love the overall orientation of the grain. Just attention to detail is definitely very nicely done. So well sculpted, well rounded. The handles feel excellent in the hand. So my initial impression of this is a beautiful piece of functional artwork. Now, keeping in mind that this is a 24-inch saw, you can see that at this point I have picked up myself some significant cutting ability over my prior saws. So certainly an upgrade, but at this point I do need to ready myself for field use. So I am going to prepare this a little bit. I'm going to get my boiled linseed oil. I am going to fully saturate this wood and get a nice coating on it, and hopefully be able to swell up this mortise and tenon joint here just a bit to avoid that movement. Again, like I said, I just don't want to potentially risk damaging this in the future, so I'm going to remove my blade, remove my paracord tensioner, and then basically prepare this to get this nicely coated with some boiled linseed oil. Now, overall, these mortise and tenons are cut very nicely, but like I mentioned, there is just a tiny bit of play in one of my tenons. Now, I figured that out by basically swapping it back and forth between the handles, and the sloppiness followed the tenon side and not the handle side. So in that regard, I know it is basically a slightly undersized tenon, but if you can imagine how difficult it must be to get this exactly perfect, and even at that, of course, wood is prone to swelling and shrinking, so there's not too much you can do about that. But again, just that is the tenon side, and then looking closely here, you can see this is the mortise side, and I'll zoom in on that for a little detail. Now you can see it is nicely and evenly shaped. Overall, a nice rectangle. You can see it was originally drilled out, and then you must use chisels or something like that to really complete it. So overall, just nicely done. And here's the detail on the back of the handle, which is slotted to accept that blade when it's folded up. Laser cut, nice and straight, just perfect. And then you can see the little notch for the indexing of that paracord tensioner. So overall, just beautiful craftsmanship, extremely well done, and just laser perfect lines. So simple enough here. Just gonna pop this open. And get to work. So I have these rags, which I've already been using with some linseed oil. I'm just going to start by generally treating these things. So we'll load up this rag, and I'm usually pretty darn generous with this stuff, and I just go as heavy as I can to really try to coat as much of the wood as I possibly can. So anyway, my hands end up kind of soaked in the stuff a little bit. I don't really care. I'm generally not all that cautious. I probably should be, and I'll find out the hard way someday, but for now, whatever. Now, I'm not focusing on the tenons quite yet because I plan on kind of soaking them at length in this cup. So I'm going to pour a little in there, and wow, just look at how that color just pops. That is just beautiful. Very gorgeous. I am really excited about this saw. The thing is, when you're this proud to own something, you must be extremely proud to be able to make it. So, Nick, gotta say, man, hats off to you. You are doing some mighty gorgeous work here. And it just kind of gives it that nice, rich, deep, grained, kind of popping depth. That just looks super nice. So now that everything's generally covered, I do kind of want to swell these joints a little bit. So I'm just going to get some of the oil inside here and really saturate it. Now, interestingly enough, as I'm pouring it in the top, it may be really soaking in there because the first time I did it, it kind of disappeared on me. But we'll just let that sit as a little puddle in there for a bit. And same with this. We'll fill that up and just really let that soak in there and kind of swell that mortise so it snugs it up. I'm going to make sure that these are good and full. And I'm going to leave them kind of sitting there for, I don't know, half an hour or so. And I'll come back and wipe all this off. I'm just letting all this just really saturate in here. I'm also going to fill this up with just enough to fully submerge the end. And I'm just going to let this sit here for a little while and really saturate these ends like I said. And it's an oily mess right now, which I know. That's why I'm doing it in this bucket. And I'm just going to let this stuff sit here for a little while, and then I'll come back and clean up and wipe it all down. So now that that's good and saturated, I'll just let it do its thing. And I'll come back in a little bit and finish it up. So it's been about 2 hours since I've seen you guys last, and I've basically just been continually kind of moving the oil around so I didn't get any sort of stagnant areas that were drying on this. So just continually moving the oil around and then dipping these tenons, and then my mortises are still full to the brim. So I think after a couple hours here of kind of letting this oil soak in here, it's time to give this a real nice cleaning, and I'll let it dry overnight. So at this point, I'm just going to clean all this off really well, and then I'll just kind of fine tune it with a clean rag. But I think this did pretty much hopefully what I needed it to. So I'm just going to do a real good job cleaning all this stuff up, and then we'll let it dry overnight, and after that I will check in with you guys tomorrow. So it's the next morning, and here I have my pieces, which have basically dried overnight, and they look beautiful. So at this point, it's time to put this saw back together and get it really prepared for field use. So getting close. So as I work to reassemble this, what I decided I was going to do is put some additional washers between the handle and the blade. So basically inside here, there will be some additional washers. I'm not sure if I need one or two, but I'm just going to try to cut down on a little bit of the ability for the blade to kind of wander around. So that's just going to tighten up the tolerances just a little bit. So that is one minor modification I'm going to make here. Nothing substantial, and I think it's going to be just a touch difficult for me to get these washers in here, but I don't know, I'll experiment with it here and see how it goes. So just working now to reassemble this thing, and we'll go from there. Now in terms of cleaning up that sort of handle sloppiness here, you'll see this side does not move at all. Perfect. And then this side here, unfortunately, does still have a little bit of that twist. So I don't know that there's anything I'm going to be able to do about this. Maybe if I just flip this around once to see if it improves. So going to this side, no twist at all. And then to this side now, here you'll see that sloppiness. So I don't know if there's anything I'm going to be able to do about that. I hope that doesn't bother me while I use the saw. But I don't know. I'm a little bit at a loss here as to what the best thing to do is. I don't think this is going to improve. But I don't know. It's just something I'm going to have to watch, and hopefully it does not get worse over time. The other thing that has me just a little bit concerned is in my cut. You know, that is a pretty good amount of movement. Actually, if you look at how much that moves now that I do it this way, I was only rocking this before. This is moving up and down, so I don't know. I'm at a little bit of a loss here. That to me seems like it shouldn't have that much movement, so I mean, look at that. I don't know. That's unfortunate, but I think I'm going to go with it, give it a try, and then see how it cuts and go from there. So now I have this reassembled and ready to go. So I think that's about the right tension on the blade there. I'm not 100% sure, but I know that this feels reasonably well wound up, and I think I am ready to go. So what I'll do is actually I'll use it this way so that the play is in this end, which I think will help me out, and hopefully I'll find out it does not affect me in any sort of way. But now there's only one thing left to do, and that's test this bad boy out. So let's get it outside and give it a rip. Okay, so now I'm going to give this a try. If you look here, that's probably a 5-inch or so log, so this will be a nice test for this. Wow. Well, a little bit of chatter in the blade there. That's my own inexperience. Other than that, I mean, this made very quick work of that log. Felt excellent in the hand. My initial impression, this feels very light. It's amazingly light for how much like wood is here. So it feels excellent. I don't know if I have that tension perfect. It feels about right with how hard that paracord is twisted up. I feel as though I have the tension just about right, but overall it's going to take a little bit of experience for me to get this dialed in, but overall initially I am very impressed. So this time I'm giving this just one more twist. It does feel better in terms of the overall tension, so let's give this another try here. Well, so you can see my cut curved a little bit on me. Again, that could be either my inexperience or just the nature of a saw like this. I'm thinking it's probably mostly on me. Looking down, this saw looks to be pretty much true, so I don't think that was my problem. So I'm going to give this one last cut and just see what my final thoughts are. Now I'm really going to focus on trying to keep this nice and straight. I think the last time it was kind of me being sort of lackadaisical, so just trying to start this cut really nice and straight here and paying attention to my positioning and how I'm holding the saw, letting the blade do all the work. little bit better that time, but it is still curving on me pretty hard. So I don't know if that's me, just the pressure I'm putting on it, the nature of the saw, because the blade does bend a little bit. I don't know if I need a little more tension on there, but certainly something I will have to experiment and gain some overall understanding of this through time. And so again, just taking a look at that cut, you'll see that it definitely has some curve to it. So again, I don't know if that's just me or the nature of a saw like this and just a technique thing, but well, you know, like I said, I'll just continue to practice and gain an understanding, and that's pretty much how this whole thing goes anyway. So overall, it's obvious that it cuts very nicely and quickly through the wood. That's not really the issue. For me, it's really kind of a technique and then keeping my cuts as straight as I can. So alright guys, there you have it. A quick look at the Stowell's Outdoor Solutions bucksaw. Overall, a beautiful piece, very nicely made. I still have a little bit of ways to go to completely understand this in terms of my overall technique and ability to get a good straight cut. I think I need to experiment with my blade tension here, maybe going a little bit tighter, but it feels about right to me, so I guess a little bit surprised at that. I did find that, you know, obviously you saw my cuts were wandering on me a little bit, and I am ultimately concerned just with that little bit of play in there. Now again, I don't know if that's typical or really kind of in line with most other buck saws, or if it's kind of unique to this one at this time, but I'll continue to watch it, continue to experiment. But overall, I know that at the end of the day, I have myself a beautiful handmade and heirloom quality piece. So alright guys, thanks for stopping by. I hope you like what you saw. I hope you found it a little bit informative. If you like what you saw, please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Take care now. I'll see you soon.